On this episode of Africa's Big Switch, the ABS team sat down together with Hubert Waterings. Hubert is a social development specialist at the World Bank, and he's been there for just over 6 years. He's worked across a number of different roles while at his time there, being the legal counsel at the World Bank and also an environmental specialist. He also has a military background, and in a previous life, he was a lawyer in Belgium. Sometimes Hubert spends his time providing lectures at the universities in Burundi and across different African countries. We hope you enjoy this. Okay, welcome to another episode of Africa's Big Switch. Our guest today is Hubert, who is a social development specialist at the World Bank Group. Welcome, Hubert.
Hello, everyone.
I'm joined today with Bolaji, who's going to be the co-host for this episode. And let's get straight into it. So, Hubert, please tell us a little bit about what you do at the World Bank Group.
So hello, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to participate to this very interesting podcast. Basically, what we are doing at the World Bank as a social development specialist is like either development and implementation of SSI projects, social and sustainable projects, or working on the environmental and social framework of the World Bank, which is a set of different standards to be able to be compliant to some of the main environmental social standards of the World Bank. So we are doing this during preparation of the project, so working with the counterparts and the stakeholders, and then during the implementation phase, we are supervise that during the entire duration of the project. I'm a lawyer by training, and so I started at the World Bank in the legal department, and then as I studied environmental law in the US, I slowly switched and shifted to the environmental and social field and sector, and now I'm based here in Burundi since 3 years, and before I was in Niger, in West Africa, and that's pretty it. Happy to discuss this further.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So you're a lawyer by trade, or at least by education. And started off as a lawyer and have kind of moved towards policy work on the ESG side. Is that fair to say?
Yes, precisely. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the work you do around Africa, like as you mentioned, Niger and Burundi, what kind of policies per se, and which industries do you kind of work towards implementing social or environmental policies in?
Well, so we have a lot of different sectors where the bank intervenes, which are like health, education, energy, social safety nets, social protection, labor, and so I'm active in all those sectors, and as I said, I'm verifying if those projects are in compliance with our environmental social standards, which are I'm going to maybe cite all of them, which is going to be maybe interesting to understand what it looks like. So the first one is the assessment and management on environmental and social risk. The second one is labor and working condition. The third one, resources efficiency and pollution prevention. The fourth is community and health and safety. Fifth, land acquisition. Six, biodiversity. Seven, indigenous people. 8, cultural heritage. 9, financial intermediaries. And 10, stakeholder engagement and information disclosure. So in all those projects, we are mainly trying to see how and whether those standards are relevant for the project, and then we're like trying to apply those standards and find some like mitigation measures for those projects to be compliant and respect environment and social, to mitigate the utmost way possible all the adverse impact to environmental, social, and on the people and on all the beneficiaries.
Okay, interesting. Can you give us an example, any project if you want to, but we've mostly been focusing on energy on our podcast. So can you give us an example of how these have been implemented on an energy project within the continent?
Yes. So, indeed, in Niger, we worked a lot on the Kandaji project. I don't know if you hear about it. It's a huge dam at the border of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So it was like a very challenging. It's still a very challenging project because we are, implementing a project in a very dangerous zone. So which implies like a lot of security aspects. And so, but I think it's a super interesting project because like it's something, and it's gonna double the access to energy in that zone of Sahel. So it's very interesting. And a second one is the Mulembwe project here in Burundi. Less challenging regarding the security, but like super challenging for the implementation, and as well, it's going to double the access in Burundi, so double the capacity of energy access in Burundi from like 50 megawatt to 100. So those projects have huge impacts, very tangible, and that's why it's so important to work on that, and trying to reach the SDG 7 goals. And basically those are like two projects that cross my mind right now.
Hubert, you seem to have a very interesting life. Because even while I was researching about this podcast, right, before we did this episode, I saw that you have a very interesting background. And I know I'm going to take us back a little bit before we kind of move forward. So you have a background in the military. You have a background in law. You are also a professor or a lecturer at a university in Burundi. All of this, like really cool, interesting things. And you seem to have lived in multiple places around the world and trying to solve societal problems. So my question is, why did you follow this path? Why did you want to become a social development specialist? And I know I'm taking you back a little bit to the intro, but I'm just curious, right?
No, but this is a super interesting question. And sometimes I still like, thinking about it. And I think it's always a question of personal fulfillment. When I was a tax lawyer in Belgium, I didn't have this, and I really wanted to give back because I got a ton of opportunities with some change, like through my, like when I was born in the RC, but then I grew up in the RC, then in Belgium, and the Belgian education gave me the opportunity to be able to work in a lot of places, and that's why I'm trying to give back, and that's why I started to work in social development, because this is exactly what I want to do. Being able to work on the field, to meet the people that we are trying to help, and working with them in order to share prosperity. And that's why I was like very seduced by the work of the World Bank when I arrived in Washington, DC, and I had the chance to apply and to work for them. And now I really think that our role and to be able to share this international experience with like these young law students, for instance. I think it's good for them to have like someone who work in different places and I really found this an amazing experience to be able to be professor here in Burundi. Maybe I didn't mention that my mother grew up here.
Wow.
And so it's such a being back to my roots. It's something that it's very difficult to explain, but it feels so good. I must admit. And
amazing, and that's quite inspiring. You mentioned your passion to share prosperity, and I know earlier on you mentioned a couple of energy projects that you've worked on across Africa. So my question is, looking at things from a lawyer's perspective. So I think as we spoke before the podcast that I recorded, I come from a technical background, so I don't really understand a lawyer's perspective in terms of its contribution to social development. So maybe this would be a good opportunity for you to educate me, So what does your day-to-day look like as a social development specialist at the World Bank?
When we're working with the government here, my colleagues from the energy sector are mostly, trying to implement like three main projects here. One is like regarding solar grids, solar panels, and the other one is the I told you the bujumbura project, and the third one is regarding the universal access to energy and complying with the SDG 7. So we are working on different things like the policy reforms, when sometimes like some different things are new, like, renewable energies, like solar panels, etc. Sometimes you don't have the legal framework to develop a project. So you really need to discuss with the government to be able to have a safe and good legal framework regarding that. So like, my day-to-day is now those projects are under implementation. So we are mostly going to the field and trying to see how it's implemented, and if everyone is safe, everyone like is meaningfully consulted, if there are like complaints. It's safe for the people next to the projects, and if like people are if there is like any resettlements, if we found like new zones for them to be resettled, etc. So that's basically what we are doing in the energy sector. Like my colleagues would explain you different things and way more technical. And I'm sure that it would be interesting for our next podcast, maybe, to interview them. That's what we are trying to do.
Amazing.
As I said, social development is two different things, but especially the SF is like deeply protecting the beneficiaries of the projects, and that's why we're trying to do. Like, that of course there is like always positive impacts, but when there are negative impacts, we need to mitigate them. Otherwise, there is no sense, of course. Yeah.
That's incredible. And do most of your projects, because you mentioned some field work there, so are most of your projects based in Burundi?
Yeah. So I'm covering other projects in Rwanda, Eastern Congo. Well, but it's a bit difficult to supervise them right now due to the security matters. But yes, we are trying to always be being based in the countries. There's like a huge decentralization policy from HQ to the field, and I think it's extremely important be there on the field, to be able to see and to discuss with all the the stakeholder, the population, and that's why we are doing this, and working on the design of the project with all the stakeholders. I think it's extremely important for the appropriation of that. We are doing a lot of what we call capacity building. So, trying to do some trainings every 2-3 months, and create like a cadre of very good specialists. And we are trying to work with young people and to have access to universities and to be able to discuss with the young specialists like engineers, lawyers, etc., in order for them to be able to work on the project of the international organization. And I think it's very important indeed.
That's fantastic. I mean, I echo Balaji's comments. You have a really interesting role, and I think you bring an interesting perspective to our listeners on how different, not just energy projects, but different infrastructure projects, and how they're assessed from a social development angle and the impact it has on countries and essentially the well-being of the people within the country. So I think it's a really interesting space, if I'm being honest. And at some point you mentioned you speak with the government, or you work in hand with the government on mitigating risks, if there are risks in a particular project structure, or supporting them on policies. Are there, to your knowledge, what across the places you work, do you think any country has better SDG policies compared to the other, or are there any kind of interesting streams of work you've gotten involved in which you can share on those?
Yeah, well, definitely. Some countries are way further in terms of ESG and compliance with like SDG, etc. Difficult to cite them, but definitely there. But that's what we are trying to see, is to work with all the different governments and counterparts and stakeholders to be able to develop that everywhere, and to be able to be complying with the Paris Agreement, and so we're trying to do that, and I know that there were like some critiques regarding the sometimes that the World Bank was not enough working in for climate change and in climate change, and we deeply trying to work on that. And I think it was like extremely interesting to hear what like all the governments, the African governments, in the Paris summit a few weeks ago said, like, we need to work all together, because indeed, like, the developed country create this situation, and now we have a gap of development here in Africa, but we cannot use our resources because you made that. So now you have to help us for like renewable energies, etc. And it was interesting to hear, like, see Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa saying, like, we don't want any promises now. We want like acts and action, and promises are not enough. And we can wait for some of the project, but really need this electrification and energy project in Congo, in the Congo region. And they seem to have like now being together and have the same opinion. And I think it's going to be very helpful for the continent. the Inga project, what I was talking about, and what Sassou Nguesso and Ravin Fosa said. So yeah, I'm sure that we will see a lot of those projects coming along very soon, because yeah, it's the most important thing right now. Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot of lessons learned, and I have not been to East Africa before. I have not been to Burundi, Rwanda, or maybe even DRC, which are the 3 countries you mentioned that you operate in. And I guess for my benefit, or for the benefit of other people as well who haven't been to the region, could you walk us through an example where perhaps one of the ones you went for your field trip? So an example where there was a situation, you went with your team with the World Bank to address that situation and what that output looked like. So the reason why I'm asking is because so quite often solutions need to be tailored to the specific needs of that society, right? There's no one size fits all. But I'm just trying to imagine being in your shoes, because like I said, I quite admire the kind of work you do. And I would just like to, I would really appreciate if you can just walk us through where you found a situation, perhaps maybe in wherever country or community you've been in, and the type of solution you provided them with, and I guess how that looks like in the end. So almost like a short story, if that's okay.
I have plenty of them, but I know that we don't have 3 hours of the podcast.
Maybe we'll do another podcast.
But yes, but you know what? It's almost like my everyday job to go to discuss with people and to find tailor-made solution for them to be satisfied. And as you said, it's always very different. You cannot come with a solution that functioned and worked in West Africa and trying to apply it without any change in East Africa. Like everyone is different. Everyone is reacting differently. And you need to really pay attention of the cultural standards. And sometimes it's kind of hard. And that's what we are doing almost every day. Always trying to do that. And so even here, when we are speaking about the rain season and the dry season, sometimes you don't think how the dry season could impact our job. And just an example of those trucks, going to the field, and then there's dust everywhere because it's a dry season. And we were okay, but so how can we help the people on the field to not being impacted by the dry season? Because of course everyone is going to say yeah, but we need to have this project finished as soon as possible because it's going to have a huge impact on people's life. But you cannot do it without paying attention of the consequences of it. And so we had to put tons of water on those roads to be able to diminishing the dust, and that's they came with this solution, and I think it was a good example of discussing all together and finding a good solution for everyone. And but this is one of the examples of this. But as I said, it's almost every day trying to discuss all together with committees and create and find solution for like the project to be able to continue without impacting people. That's really what we're doing and trying to help.
Amazing. And just to play devil's advocate, have you ever been on a project that you came in with the good intention to help the local community, but that didn't turn out as well as you planned? So there was a negative consequence to that. And perhaps what did you take from that experience?
Sometimes there's like, adverse impact that you cannot, imagine when you are like, designing the project.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have like anything right now in mind. But yes, of course it happened. And that's how we developed like, some experience of like, impacts that you really couldn't see coming. And but I don't have an example right now. Maybe as you said, there is like for next one, I'll find a good example of that. But yeah, it happens all the time, everywhere, for every company, every international organization. That's why we have like, those standards trying to be compliant. That's why we have like this inspection panel when, some like the beneficiaries of the project can send complaints, and we are like trying to investigate to see how we can help them and what happened and how we can change the situation. So if you're interested, you can definitely go on the inspection panel website of the World Bank, and you will see like a lot of example where there was like investigation, and so you're definitely gonna see. I must say that I'm lucky enough that I've never been involved in those things right now, because it's kind of stressful when even though you did everything you could do, but sometimes there's like a zero risk policy doesn't work and doesn't exist. So it's trying just to mitigate them as much as you can, and when you discover a new one, you're trying to mitigate it again and again and again. It's that's what we're doing.
Okay, so I think I get a bit more idea of how you get consulted. So if there was a project in place, like from the private sector or the government, which had to do with, say, building a dam in Nigeria, for instance, the dam will get built, and then the borrower or the government entity will approach the World Bank and then ask you guys to run an assessment on the project standards against the SDG 7. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's not exactly like that. It's like mostly the two different things, but there's like a huge link between like, our ESF, environmental social framework, and ESG policies, because they're just like showing that stakeholders, investors, and even governments now are paying attention on environmental and social impacts of the project. Either they are in the private sector, either they are like in the public sector. So we are mostly working in the public sector and with governments, and so not really in the private sector, but we have our private sector entity, IFC, who's working, which is working with the private sector everywhere in Africa, and have a very ambitious development strategy here in Africa and in energy as well. And they're definitely gonna work mostly on ESG with like their performance standards, which are like the basis of our environmental social framework which was created in 2018 before we had like some other environmental and social policies. And yeah, so that's how it works.
Yes. And so in terms of driving the ESG agenda, is that something, I know you work primarily with public entities, well, the public sector. Do you work with governments to drive the agenda, or do they consult you more on a project specific basis?
Okay. So it's actually a little bit of both.
Okay.
So sometimes like they're gonna consult us during their like national development plan. Well, I don't know all the countries in Africa, but here they're like doing it for like the next 7 years, for instance. And definitely regarding that, they're gonna see how they can like find financing. You know, it's like or they're gonna. So we will already discuss this, and so we are working on a country country policy framework, and we are like trying to see how the partnerships of all the international organization and like active in the development, and then we are discussing this with the government to see where we can help them and what are the main sectors where we're gonna help them. And so yeah, it's of course it's an upstream work. They're like consulting everyone, and then they're like creating their development plan, and that's how we do it. Sometimes they're like during those, for instance, 7 years, there's like, I don't know, so for instance a crisis or just something is changing, and so they're gonna see and come and find us like, oh, can you help us here with either another project, investment project, or some just maybe technical assistance, and yeah, that could be one of both actually. Yeah.
Okay. And ultimately, this all helps to support these countries in securing financing, ensuring that their ESG credentials are strong, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
This has really been like an insightful conversation. My question following that would be, what are you most excited about for the future of Africa in terms of social development? And I like how earlier on in the conversation you mentioned the Paris conference that took place, and you mentioned His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of South Africa, speaking about how the framework in Africa needs to change, and how like you don't just need to hand us little amounts of money. We need a large amount of money to solve our problems. And also there was a trending video as well with the president of Kenya, William Ruto, who gave a similar, I guess, call to action to the Western countries. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of talk about social development in Africa. From your perspective, being on the ground, being in the field, and been doing this for like so many years, what are you most excited about for the future of social development in Africa?
Wow, that's a super interesting question. Yeah, like a lot of people are saying that the future is African and Africa is the future. And I'm very excited about the fact that there's like tons of young, dynamic people here in Africa trying to work for Africa and to develop it. And I really can see how like, people are like way more conscious about like all the different challenges, and they are so motivated to come back here in Africa to work. And I see like those very young African leaders coming back to the field, sometimes with, like way less money in terms of salaries, but just because they really want to help. And when I saw that, and I'm seeing it, this makes me way more confident for the future here. So in terms of an aspect of like social development, I think like the most important thing is education from a very young age, and this is, I really think that this is the most what excites me a lot is like to work with governments to develop like strong education projects and develop them all together, because it's the most important thing. That's pretty it.
So yeah, the question we usually ask our guests on the show, right at the end of the episode, is where would you want to go to for an all-expense paid trip in Africa, and why?
This is a nice question. Maybe I'm too patriotic, but I would say Rwanda. And why? Because it's the most beautiful country in the world.
You are definitely very patriotic.
No, but like Africa it's so big and so beautiful, and like through my job, I had the chance to be able to travel everywhere, almost like in South, Central, West, and East Africa, and all those places are so beautiful. And so like it was like mostly a joke, but it's seriously like everywhere we can go and see amazing things in Africa. It's so beautiful, and I encourage like all the young African abroad, like in Europe, in the United States, everywhere, to go back and being able to work, because they need us as much as we need them, and so please, when you have like the opportunity to go back there, please go and work with and for them. That's my main advice.